Okay, welcome to an introduction to knowledge management. My name is Lynn Murnane, and I have a company called Lynn Knows Stuff, which seems quite relevant, and I've got a bit of experience around using knowledge management, so I wanted to share that with you. So I'm a bit more business focused here rather than using the Microsoft suite, but hopefully I can share some cool stuff with you. So, all right, it's fun not seeing people. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this conference is being hosted, and pay respect to our elders past, present and future. There is a code of conduct with all of these conferences, and I know that we're all adults and we understand it, but we like to remind people that we need to treat each other with respect. So if you want more details, you can see there's a link in the slide here that you can go and have a look at what our code of conduct is. But let's be respectful, please. So don't be too hard on my purple hair. Okay, so what am I going to talk about? A lot of stuff. And I know I'm going to jam a lot of stuff in this 30 minutes, but the idea is to try and give you an overview of what I know about knowledge management, 13 years of experience, as well as aligning that with some of the stuff that I've been teaching at a postgraduate level knowledge management course here in Melbourne. So I'm going to talk to you about a whole lot of different stuff. So a little bit about me, those of you who don't know, I do a lot of different things, but I also I successfully studied this knowledge management subject at postgraduate level and got my Masters of Business Information Technology. So not only have I lived the experience as a student, I'm now on the other side and have lived the experience as the lecturer and the marker of the work that comes out at the end. No wonder I need whiskey to survive and coffee at various times of the day. And when I'm out and about, I like to take photos and take photos of birds. I like to hang out at the Western Treatment Plant, of all the weird places to go, but there's some great bird life down there. And once upon a time, I would have told you that I am risk adverse, but as you can see, I've jumped out of a plane strapped to a man, so maybe I'm not so risk adverse after all. I've spent most of my work life in corporate locations, had to wear the proper corporate attire, but currently I'm working at a manufacturing plant that's based on the refinery site at Corio in Geelong in Melbourne. So my work life consists of wearing lots of safety gear when I'm wandering around the workplace, including safety boots and glasses and helmets and earplugs and all sorts of fun stuff like that. So it's a whole new world for me when I'm working at a major hazard facility and I have to worry about chemical reactors and things like that. So interesting work life I think I've had anyway. So you can check me out on all those locations. All right, so let's talk about knowledge. Some of you may have seen this knowledge pyramid. Obviously, it starts at the biggest spot at the bottom. Data becomes information, can become knowledge, and hopefully eventually wisdom. A bit of an explanation about what the types of elements of the knowledge pyramid is. So with data, we've got facts and figures. When we add some meaning to them, when we collate it or build it together, it becomes information. So we could group bits of data by, context, age, social relationships, that sort of stuff. But when we actually use it, when we have to use the know-how that's attached to that information, it becomes knowledge then. We've got meaning to it. It has some ideas or some discussions or lived experiences attached to it. And then they say eventually when it becomes patterns and processes, it should become wisdom. Now you can go and have a look at this knowledge period. It's also this pyramid. This is also very aligned to what data analysts talk about when they're collating data and making sense of data. So there's loads of research and all of that. What I do like to add to this is that whilst we use this as a way to understand the difference between data and knowledge, it actually came out of, the concept originated in a play by T.S. Eliot in 1934. So he's got some wisdom, knowledge, information elements where he talks about where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge and where is the knowledge we have lost in information. So maybe it's just a literature context as well. So something to think about. And then there are also types of knowledge. You may have heard people talking about tacit and implicit and explicit knowledge and implicit knowledge. So the common and most used type of knowledge is obviously explicit knowledge. It's codified, it's easy to write down, it's easy to give a piece of paper where we've got instructions or processes or documents written down and transfer that to one person or to another or to a group of people, depending on how we're transferring that knowledge. But there's also tacit knowledge, and that's the stuff that we have in our heads, that we learn, we intuit, we have gathered through the experiences that we've had. The knowledge that I've gained from my education and my lived experiences and my social context is going to be a little bit different to the knowledge that you have, whether our schooling is the same or different. It's going to be different based on our context in there. So it's not really easy to write some of that down. These are the things when we consider about knowledge in the workplace, we think about whether we're missing steps in a process because we've thought about a quick shortcut to how we do things. So we might not follow the processes anymore because we found an easier way to do things. And so that becomes tacit knowledge rather than explicit, because it's no longer written down somewhere. We're working our way around things. So we need to think about those sort of things as well. Plus, a lot of those processes in a workplace, the way things are done normally, the values, that's also considered to be embedded knowledge. So when you Google knowledge and knowledge types, you find 14 types of knowledge in there. So, but the key things is that we consider that explicit knowledge is easy to share or easy to write down, and tacit knowledge, which is the stuff that we learn along the way, and it's difficult to communicate, it's difficult to transfer, but that's the key part of knowledge management in some respects. So they're the things that we're trying to capture and share with people. All right, I know I always throw sidebars in there and I always then confuse myself, but when I think about knowledge management, I also think about how we motivate people to share their knowledge. We talked about how tacit knowledge is difficult to share, or I did, but then there is the reasons why that's difficult to share, and sometimes motivation is part of that. How do we encourage people to share their knowledge? Is the culture in our workplace appropriate to sharing that knowledge as well? So sidebar I've thrown in there is that have a look at the stuff that Dan Pink's done on motivating ourselves and what are the kind of things that we need to use. I think, and I've sent the YouTube link that I've got there is a RSA drawing of his TED Talk, where he talked about that it's not, after a certain income level, it's not about money that motivates us to work. There are other elements then that motivates us, and that's mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So, and you can see that there's an overview of those topics there. But the idea is that if we have these things, then we may potentially be more inclined to share our knowledge, and therefore it might be easier to share our tacit knowledge in there. So I went back to the study notes for the postgraduate knowledge management course, and as you can see, I had 6 or 7 different meanings about what knowledge management is. And Thomas Davenport in 1994 also, and he's considered to be a bit of the father, I guess, of knowledge management in some respects, defined knowledge management as the process of capturing, distributing and effectively using knowledge. And aligned to that, and the feeling I have about what knowledge management is about providing access to the right information at the right time and the right place. So making sure that the people who need that knowledge have it is what we're trying to do with knowledge management. So yes, there's lots of formalized research about what knowledge management is. And if you're into that sort of stuff, I've given you some samples there. But yeah, it's about making sure that people have access to the right information at the right time so they can make knowledgeable decisions. From my experience, where does knowledge management sit inside organisations? Well, I've worked in all of these teams inside organisations. So sometimes they sit in the IT or the tech team, and that's because when they've implemented the software that supports the knowledge management strategy and system, that they've decided that perhaps it's because it's a software application that supports it, it should sit with the IT or tech team. It can work provided that the focus is back on people. So yeah, it's sat with HR teams because the organisation has acknowledged that that knowledge management is aligned with learning and it's about people and culture. So it could sit there. Or in other organisations, I've been part of the operations team, and that's because often it's this service organisation or a call centre type activity, and knowledge management forms part of the support element for that organisation. So I've worked in teams and worked in organisations where knowledge management has sat in any or sometimes across those sort of areas. So it's been interesting. I would just like to throw out, I have some thoughts about how knowledge management sits in the world. And I think very much so that learning and knowledge are very closely aligned. Often from my experience, particularly around call centres, there's been training done that's given people the structure or the skeleton of the learning that they need to do their job, and sometimes they're given too much and they don't keep it, and therefore knowledge management then becomes the context or the muscle that sits on that skeleton to help support later down the track the training that they got at the beginning. So from experience working in a call centre back Medibank private when it wasn't public, they spent 3 months and $13,000 per person training them to be a call centre operator, but a lot of that knowledge was learnt. They gave them big manuals to look at that people didn't have time to look at again. So the knowledge management tool was there to support that learning eventually. Perhaps the training should have been about where to find the knowledge as opposed to here is the knowledge. But yeah, so my concept is that they work very closely together. I also believe that if we give people the knowledge they need to do the jobs, then the customer service improvements will follow, because we're giving them the confidence, the skills, and the knowledge that they need, and therefore they will do the best that they can do for our customers, regardless of whether it's a call centre job or any other element in there. So I'm throwing lots of concepts, I know. All right. So what do KM practitioners do? We connect. That's basically what it's all about. It's about finding, connecting the right information to the right people that need it, or maybe it's actually connecting people to people. So what I'm showing you on the table there in the middle of the screen is from the Knowledge Manager's Handbook, but basically the NOCO team had done a survey in 2014, 2017, and actually they've just closed off a survey now about knowledge management activities. Highly recommend to have a look at some of the things that they've found, but knowledge practitioners around the world have gone in and said, here's what's important to us, here's our priorities, here's where we are in our programs, here's our maturity levels, here's how important we think knowledge management is. And what I got from the book is what elements of knowledge management have been given priorities. And this is actually out of I'm pretty sure it's the 2014 data, but they're saying the highest priority here was about knowledge management is about connecting people through communities and networks. So we're about setting up communities of practice, or finding the right people to answer the question for you, or finding the ways that we can pull these people together, all the information together. That it's very closely aligned to learning. Perhaps the 70-20-10 learning model is relevant here, because it's about learning from experience, learning on the job. Yes, there's about improved access to information. So how do we connect people to the right information that they need? And that could be through our search tools and our portals and Cortex and all those fun things that have happened in there. And how do we then, when we're connecting and sharing that knowledge, how do we get it to be retained? How do we make that tacit knowledge into explicit knowledge? How do we keep it and make it easily accessible, or share it in the brain? So I'll pick those out. And best practices is obviously pretty important as well, and I'll even talk about some of that a bit further down. But yeah, these are pretty much the key pieces that people think that are important when they're looking at their knowledge management programs. So link to the survey, highly recommend you go and have a look. All right, so the postgraduate KM course. The key part of this course is about writing a knowledge management strategy for an organisation. So the idea is that the students must look at where does the organisation want to be, what they must know to get to where they want to be, and where they want to be. So where do they want to be? Where are they now? And what knowledge do they need, or what knowledge and learning do they need to get to where they want to be? That's what that strategy flow should be. Where do they want to be? Where are they now? What do they need to get there? Is basically what the strategy assessment they have. And we go through a lot of other elements about what should be included in that strategy, with a big look at culture. They don't use particular tools. We don't specify which tools should be used for knowledge management as part of this course. And given that this course is part of the Masters of Business Information Technology, it's great that there's not a focus on a specific system. We're looking at what are the other elements to support building a strategy and therefore a knowledge management system in place at an organisation. Some of the things that we consider when we're looking at the knowledge management strategy and some of the things that we share, and I don't know if you've heard about the Cynefin model, I'm sure many of you have, but the idea is understanding how decision making occurs inside an organisation. So that's a really good model for, as I said, understanding decision making. I've used this previously to look at practices inside the organisation. So best practices, the way we do things all the time, the way when a question is asked, how we can answer with the same answer every time the question comes up. Whereas good practice is how it's a fairly similar sort of question, but there might be a need to ask an expert or go and do some other analysis to give their answer. So it's still a fairly simple question, but it's just that might be more than one choice. Using that in the workplace, I worked for a educational organisation that was quite had some fairly strong controls on it. Was English language testing was part of it, so it had some really strong government controls sitting on it and how we needed to make sure things were following the letter of the law, if you like. And so we had lots of best practices in play there about how we monitored the students who were taking an English language test and made sure that they had the right identities and things like that. Lots of really good best practice in place. But we saw a good practice come out to play in there where one of the testing centres decided to use an extra identification method that was a good practice. It wasn't the way they had to do things, but they decided on a different way to do it, and so they actually then that good practice became a best practice. But we weren't aware of it until we started sharing knowledge on a community portal. So there are really good things in there. The other thing we do in the KM strategy is also talk about the new knowledge management international standard. So there's the reference in there, and I can share with you an overview of what type of things that they discuss inside the standard if you're so interested. It's quite, it's fairly broad, and it's more about guidance on the types of activities that you need to think about when you're putting together a knowledge management strategy. But it's a good start on having a standard for knowledge management. It's not yet tested, be a few years I think before it becomes formalised to be tested and audited inside organisations, but keep an eye out because it will be something to consider in the future when you have to think about things like ISO 9000 and ISO 14000, which are some of the things I need to think about in my manufacturing workplace. So, all right, and what else do we need to talk about? So the key part on the left-hand column in there is that we talk about the types of infrastructures that impact our knowledge management strategy, and these type of infrastructures have research supporting the things that are in play. But in the workplace, we potentially look at them as people, processes and technology. So what we're teaching our postgraduate students actually relates what many of us do in the workplace when we look at what are the impacts to implementing a program or doing best practice or looking at process improvements inside our organisation. These are probably the key areas that we focus on: people, process and technology. I've just flipped around the order, but they map to what we're teaching at a postgraduate level. We're telling them to look at these things that are in infrastructures. So technology, what tools can we use? What are the types of tools that we can use to capture and reuse knowledge? What are the structures that are part of operations, if you like, the governance program, the processes that are in place, and most importantly, our cultural infrastructures. Do we have the supports in place to support knowledge sharing inside organisation? So just showing you there that what we do in the real world matches what we teach at postgraduate level. As I've suggested, even though we're talking about knowledge management as part of an IT education program, it is not systems focused. It highlights that the a knowledge management strategy and any frameworks that you put out or any systems won't work unless there are 3 key things in there, and that is that there must be leadership support. You must have a GM or a director or whoever who will support you building a knowledge management strategy inside your organisation. Whether you're going in to fix something up or going in to start anew, you must have that leadership support. On the one hand, I would say to you that if you build it, it will come, might work as a knowledge management program, but good governance is very important. You need the structures and the rules and the boundaries to help support the activities that you're doing. And also, and probably the most important thing, we must have a culture that supports knowledge sharing. So at that leadership support level, we need them to help influence the culture and participate in the knowledge processes, and then that must be brought down into the way things are done, how we operate. Do we reward knowledge sharing? And those are all important things to think about when you're looking at knowledge management and what the knowledge management program inside this IT master's level program considers and is considered important. So we don't look at tools, we look at what the business needs when we're looking at that knowledge management strategy, which is what we're doing in the workplace. So trying to align it back to a 365 world and how that might be, how that might impact us. The survey, again, when I look at that table again, talks about the kind of things that are important for knowledge managers based on the surveys that have been conducted by them. And so things like communities, on-the-job learning, best practices, and search. Or search is probably the biggest fun thing that we need to be looking at. So communities of practice. I could even share some research, and I think I've done in the notes, had a look at the community of practice principles set up by Etienne Wenger. Communities of practice are meant to be about having a shared problem or a shared desire to make change or a shared desire to learn. Often they should be voluntary to be successful, but often we're voluntold when we're in communities. But the idea is that we're connecting so we can share knowledge, or we can find the answer to the question, or we're looking for the most experience. So I think in a 365 world, things like Yammer and other ways to share stories, SharePoint, all those sort of fun teams now, all those fun tools, and I think they are fun, there's lots of fun to be had in them, are going to be very important, and even more so important as we move ahead. But I'm also very excited about what Project Cortex has got to, how that's going to impact knowledge management, having cognitive search and context-sensitive search in play to enable people to find documents easier and hopefully then trigger conversations and information inside the workplace. I think that will be really interesting, and obviously the tools that are being built out of that through 365 are going to be really cool. How do we connect together will be really interesting. And of course now, how is work going to change in our new way of working, our working from home environment? How is knowledge management going to continue to be important and powerful in a work from home world? I guess we're disconnected because we're not face to face. So some of that connections that we need to do, we need to make sure we build them in a better way, and I'll talk about some of that if you're coming to my session tomorrow, about how we can make systems learning fun and things like that. But how do we connect now, more so online, to get work and knowledge and learning shared when we're not doing it face to face? It should be very interesting. Wow, that was fast pace. How am I going for time? Because I reckon I'm at questions. Has anyone got any questions? I've shared, there's a few more places. If you want more knowledge management, there's a few more places you can go, but does anyone have any questions for me? I do a 2 to 3 hour guest lecture at RMIT once a semester, so I can go on for hours.
No questions just yet then.
Cool. All right. And I'm for time. All right. Well, what else can I share with you? I think the postgraduate course, as I said, is system or tool agnostic. And so I've seen other surveys that tell us that 50% of knowledge management implementations globally, and you'll find that probably on the SIKM, which is Stan Garfield's site, where there's lots of forums and discussions about knowledge management. 50% of KM implementations are SharePoint. So, and I guess that's over, let's say 10 to 20 years. SharePoint's been the biggest tool that's been used inside organisations for knowledge management. Thankfully, SharePoint's got a heck of a lot easier to use, because the first few times I used SharePoint as a knowledge tool, I needed support from a SharePoint developer, and at least now I can have a team that can pretty much, once we've got the governance and structure and styles and all that sort of stuff in play, we can actually get a fairly good knowledge management tool up and running fairly quickly, because of the massive improvements and usability that's been added to SharePoint. So, and then supported by knowledge sharing and communities in Yammer has been really cool. So, but the postgraduate course is not about which tool to use. It's about making sure that we have those structures, and that we understand and have our cultures and our leadership support and all those important things in play to support building a knowledge management strategy inside your organisation.
Lynn, I do have a question, or a couple that have come in now.
Cool.
You said you were excited about the tools. How do we get other people excited about tools and about knowledge management?
Yeah, well, I've used a whole lot of different types of activities to get underway, and I have got a half-an-hour session tomorrow. I'm selling it about using sort of gamification type activities. So if I go back to Dan Pink, back a few screens back, I can't even remember what slide he was on. We'll go back, Mr. Pink. I do like Mr. Pink. Oh, there he is. We talk about the types of things that motivate us in the workplace. So for a long time, people worked for money, and getting a bonus and all that sort of stuff for getting your work done helped. And I worked at an organisation where, on the reverse side of that, carrot and stick type of motivation, we actually punished people if they didn't go and look at a knowledge management page. We questioned them about why they weren't looking, and we said and suggested that it would impact their monthly bonus if they didn't look at a knowledge management page so many times per month, because that was the only way we could measure in an early tool way back. It was way back in 2008, but I think it even started earlier than that. So negative motivation, whilst I didn't like it, or was already in play, it worked. We got people to look at knowledge management pages, and by threat of them potentially, or being questioned by their team leader in the first instance, and the potential for them to lose some of their bonus if they didn't look at the page. So, but what it did was we then hopefully showed value in looking at that content, and they kept coming back. So they were then improving the times that they were looking in there, and of course improved the content. But I don't necessarily agree with the carrot and stick motivator, even though it worked in that instance. I quite like that these three approaches about giving people autonomy, mastery, and purpose to their work life, or recognising their mastery in a topic and making them a skill or a senior leader or something like that. As important. So they're one way to I guess encourage learning and knowledge sharing inside organisations, but also competitions, using points and leaderboards and all those sort of things, and badges can potentially help encourage people to learn, because there's a bit of fun in it as well. So trying to add some fun to your processes. Again, that works at the basic level, and then to a point after a while, those points and badges and leaderboards don't necessarily be a continuous motivator, and we go back to the what Dan is saying about recognising people's mastery and enabling them to direct their own learning or direct their own work as they need to. So give them autonomy and those sort of things. So not always easy. And a constant challenge for all of us, whether it's about encouraging people to use a tool or to encourage people to change behaviours. So,
Thanks, Lynn.
all right, yep.
Sorry, one more. How much of this knowledge is going to end up in the AI/ML tools to make chatbots better?
Yeah, well, I think it will. The stuff that we can codify, the explicit knowledge that we can pull out to help answer questions is going to be really good. It's about finding the right ways or finding the ways to capture tacit knowledge. It's always going to be a challenge, I guess, until the matrix is completed and we can jam a chip into our heads to pull out some of that knowledge and push some of that in. Finding ways in your organisation to look at those tacit knowledge and some of that's implicit knowledge too, is the stuff that we don't want to share, that we're not willing to share, because it gives us some sort of sense of power. How do we motivate people to share that tacit and implicit knowledge? So again, some of that's related here, but I think AI, the fact that that will enable easier searching based on, you know, time of day, type of question, what role you're playing, that sort of stuff is going to make finding some of that knowledge that you have stored much easier. I'm really excited about the potential for those things. I think I need to do a lot more research into Cortex, but I'm really excited about the potential for that. Chatbots, many of them are fairly basic. They don't quite get language yet, but the improvements will come. Absolutely, I have no doubt about it whatsoever. And that therefore we'll work our way into that, how to extract tacit, the more complex work in knowledge management, rather than just worrying about where to find documents. So the tool can do it for us. Very exciting stuff. Looking forward to it.
And Lynn, just one final one. Any thoughts on how to quantify the value, I think, of knowledge management?
Oh, well, yeah, it's like learning and like change management. It's about behavior change. So let me couple of ways quantify it. So if you want a number, what I've done previously is measure the change between how things were done one way before we captured some knowledge, or we delivered new learning, or we did a new knowledge management implementation. What was the time that it took to find information this way versus what it now takes in our new way, and has there been a cost saving as far as that? So yes, when I think about costs for, and if I go back, and you'll find I've got plenty of presentations, when Medibank Private, when they implemented their knowledge management system, they had an internal help desk that when the call centre couldn't answer calls, they had a extra cost on top where they had a call centre that the call centre called, if you like. So there was a team that was responsible then for answering the more difficult, complex questions. So if we could get some of that, or they weren't complex, they just didn't know the answer. But the idea was that if we could simplify some of that, let's make sure we've got the answers in the one place online. We're saving time with how much time saved to find the answer to the question. Therefore, there's a cost saving for time, but there was also a cost saving for giving the right answer to the customers that then didn't mean that Medibank had to pay out extra dollars. So we can count time saving measures. We can count improvements on answers. We can start off with the silly stuff on hits and all that sort of stuff, because it's a start. It's a start for building an overview of what people are looking at and whether they're getting the answers to their questions and things like that. So there's a number of different ways that we can look at quantifying and qualifying the work that we're doing in knowledge management. Feel free to hit me up if you need more answers to that.
Thanks, Lynn. One quick one did come in. We're getting hard-hitting questions today. Does robotic process automation help in getting insights of tacit knowledge? Is there a method to follow?
It's a difficult one. I'm not sure. I think I would need to. I need to think about that. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question in this short reign of time. I'll get Megan to email me the question, or.
Yeah, so we get a report that we can output from a live event of all the questions, so which I can share with you, and you can take that out on socials.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to explore it more, but I'm not sure. Totally not sure on that one.
Thanks, Lynn. That was fantastic. No, thanks for I feel like I've been throwing a lot of questions at you, but thank you.
Yeah, well, no, cool. Because as I said, I jammed a lot into half an hour. I know I have to share with you. I know there is a competition. It's for week 3. If you would like to enter the competition, that's part of Microsoft 365 in May. Please do scan the QR code. It'll be in the deck at the end. And also, this whole event has had a whole lot of really awesome sponsors. But more importantly, Megan and Lorian and Rebecca, who've done an awesome job of pulling it together. So thanks to all our sponsors and our organisers.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much, Lynn, for your session today. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. That was really interesting, and I'm looking forward to also producing you tomorrow and hearing the next one.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone, for dialing in.
Thank you.